What tools do you actually see most excited about in AI right now?
GPT, paid teams, but I'm finding myself using Claude and Claude Sonnet just a ton for writing. And then Perplexity is absolutely my go-to as far as search and answer-based search. Perplexity has eliminated 90% of Google searches for me because it is an answer engine versus a recommendation engine.
When you think about an AI world for your sons,
I think that using it is super important. It's going to be somebody who knows how to use AI. Be that person who knows how to use the AI.
Entrepreneurs have really valuable data sets that they would love to be able to interact with a model.
You've got like the Tableaus of the world that have real funding, really understand how this stuff works and how their enterprise customers think and how they want to interact with their data. They're going to have a native opportunity to really develop these tools first.
So good to have you back on the show. As I mentioned at the top, you're our official AI expert in the forums, longtime member and just a phenomenal contributor and ECF member over the years. So thank you for all of that. You got to hear about all the story behind you about the gun that you have. That was what's your son's name again?
My son is Wyatt Williams, but he's Wyatt the Sixth.
Wyatt the Sixth, and you have this little Colt tiny 1800s revolver, and Wyatt the First, the original, the OG, used to own it and died in a gunfight, right?
Yes, exactly.
But excited to geek out on AI for a little bit, and we got a ton of stuff to talk about. But I wanted to kick things off with asking you, what are some of your favorite tools in the space, or the things you think are more exciting? Because I think there's so much AI, so many AI tools have been grossly disappointing, right? You try to use them, and it's just, there's no way to put it. They're just, the results, they sound AI-esque. The results aren't very good. I've started playing with a few that I've been excited about. I mentioned this in the forums, but one called Spiral for recreating content. Like if you have a podcast summary, I can take it and feed it examples of my own kind of maybe social summaries or titles, and then a corresponding podcast transcript. And it will pull out the patterns and how I think and how I summarize. And it'll do a really good job of summarizing things in my voice. I've liked Spiral. I think it's spiral.computer, maybe. I'm not sure about that. We'll link up to it in the show notes. I've heard a lot of good things about Claude projects, which I have not yet dove into. Anyway, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what tools do you actually see are living up to the purpose, or what are you most excited about in AI right now?
So a way to start broad there. What tool? I think we're keeping track of, 15,000 different tools that are out there right now that have been published. And it's just a rolling deal. As there's an update to the frontier models, a bunch of them become obsolete. And then there's a chase or a race for people to find market relevance out there somewhere. All in all, I would say that I am still most enamored of the frontier models. At this point on my other monitor, I have GPT still up, of course, paid teams. The caveat being that if you're paying for a license, your data is at least ostensibly protected under TOS. I use that for any sort of Python outputs. The GPTs themselves are actually really useful, but I'm finding myself using Claude and Claude Sonnet just a ton for writing. It is an arms race. They will continue to outpace each other. But I would say that most people in the AI influencer space have tilted towards Claude as far as usable outputs over the last couple of months. And it's just really become a thought partner for me. And yet it is feature limited. So you still need to use Claude in combination with GPT. So if I'm doing an ideation session, I want to get a proposal out, I get the proposal how I want it, then I still need to use GPT and its code interpreter function in order to create an output file, because GPT can create .docx or an Excel file or whatever you want. So it has utility. And then Perplexity is absolutely my go-to as far as search and answer-based search. So I have all three of those up. I probably have 7 tabs of all of them up at any one time. And the point being that the general purpose nature of this technology is sort of, best applied in general purpose applications right now, because the more specific that you're getting as far as the solutions that you're looking to get to, the more disappointing it can be. So ideation, conversation, general text, double checking, these are things that the frontier models are just fantastic at. But when you get into API-based models that are trying to do something specific on the back end, it gets sort of meh in a hurry.
So, sorry to interrupt, but when you say frontier model, you're talking about Claude, you're talking about ChatGPT, and when you talk about API model, you're talking about something that is trying to leverage those kind of foundational models with APIs to do something more specific.
Yes, exactly. So the frontier models are the billions of dollars worth of training models, and they could be open source. So the new Llama 3.1 is a frontier model. Mixtral is a frontier model. These are the big boys that are out there, and people are levering them in different ways by creating a user experience. I'll get hate if I say wrappers, but they're basically wrapping a user experience around an API, and that's yielding a result on the other end. And they can be tailored to user experience, but just from a cost perspective, like the variable costs of building these various platforms make it tough for an affordable wrapper company to yield results that are as good as the frontier model just because of the cost of access in terms of API. But if I had to identify some other things that I am impressed with, video manipulation through HeyGen is really quite good. It's almost a go-to shtick at this point, being able to create a faux Kevin who speaks Arabic or whatever it is, and it's not perfect at all. But throughout this conversation, I will probably say several times that it's one of those things that when you consider it as the worst this will ever be, it's really eye-opening. So right now it's usable. It's not perfect. It's not seamless. It's not like super fast for a real-time environment. But if you project out 6, 12, 18 months, it's very obvious that we're going to get to the point where these tools work super well. Basic image manipulation. I'm a huge fan of ideogram as far as being able to incorporate text, Midjourney, of course. And I know you wanted me to bring up like a list of like all of these other like platforms that are out there, but I'm with you. I'm pretty disappointed in most of them. I think they will get better, they will solve problems, but at the second, they're pretty underwhelming.
You had a question that I loved. We were batting around a few questions, and you were hoping to talk about kind of what this all means for the future of positive and negative as a AI in general, as a business owner and as a human, which business has been talked about ad nauseum. Humans as well, we'll kind of spare people that are we going to die at the hands of our AI overlords, harnessing our bodies a la Matrix style. But father, I think is interesting. You have 2 sons. So like when you think about an AI world for your sons, what comes to mind, positive and negative? How are you thinking about that?
First, man, what a rough few years to be a kid. Like between just the generic like social media pressures and things like that. And then a lot of these kids went through COVID and they like had these lost years where they were at home. And now they have AI heading their way. Like, man, this is rough, guys. Sorry. And kids are adaptable, so great. I think that using it is super important. I get very frustrated with educational environments who have just put the kibosh on the whole thing, and you're cheating if you use it. Well, are you? Are you really cheating if you're using it? Sure. If you're using it to compose your essay, yes. But if you're using it as a Socratic tutor such that it's pushing back on your outputs, that's pretty awesome because, I enjoy Shakespeare, but I can't actually dredge up like, some of the academic details about iambic pentameter and whatnot, right? I have a kid in AP English, right? So this comes up. So I built him a Socratic tutor. And these are off the shelf too. And it has rules that are baked into it that it can't necessarily yield the results, but instead push him to be his best him. And kids are out there on one end, kids are just cheating. just flat out cheating, putting out essays, ask any college professor, ask any high school teacher. And then somewhere in the middle, you have kids who are, in the words of Ethan Mollick, who, by the way, is a great person to follow, Wharton professor, very digestible. He calls it centaurs and cyborgs. Cyborgs are people who are just all in, and they're just like, the AI is the way. A centaur is half human, half robot, and they're using the technologies to get them to their best them. And if kids are out there in a world where these tools are available, I promise that they're going to be being used by their peers. So they need to be just like any business person. So I speak in front of like MBA audiences, and the quote that always does the rounds is, it's not going to be AI that replaces you. It's going to be somebody who knows how to use AI. And I always add at the end, be that person, right? Be that person who knows how to use the AI. Same is true with kids, that they need to know how to do this, and they're interested in certain careers. And I won't lie, I'm going to steer them away from careers that I feel like they might be just automatable out the gate. But yeah, I'm a bit of a mentor to a kid who's heading off to an Ivy League school. He wants to be a lawyer. I'm like, yikes, law. It's going to be one of those areas that's going to be a problem for you, right? So he wants to study neuropsychology in university. Great. Do it with an AI edge so that you're the brilliant brain when you go to law school. You are the centaur in law school, such that this is all integrated. You're not just tacking it on the side. It is core to what you're doing going forward.
It's funny. I was having lunch with a friend who's a copywriter the other day, and we were talking about this. There was three of us chatting about AI and how it's going to replace the future. And she's like, yeah, I'm really worried that AI is going to replace my job. And so I pull up ChatGPT and I'm like, hey, ChatGPT, come up with like the best case you can for why human copywriters are not going to be replaced by you. And so it spits it out and she's reading it. And she's like, wow, this is really good. This is really good. I'm feeling better. And then after about 10 seconds, it dawned on all of us, oh, the fact that it can make such a good case for why it's not going to replace her means it actually is. That's a really good case for why it's going to replace her. Well, but it's crazy. The number of fields you think about getting replaced in the future is meaningful.
Well, the thing is, it's not going to replace her, I assume, because she's going to be very skilled, very high. Mm-hmm. Like she's not the top of her game, but whoever she may, I don't know who she is, but I probably do. It's going to replace all the underlings. It's going to replace the 22-year-old copywriter who's trying to earn their chops. And I think that we are going to have a real cultural problem with the feeder path to people trying to build their art. It's just going to be harder to track into that. I think law is a great example. That what law firm in their right mind is going to keep really expensive, low-end transactional attorneys around when you can have models that are built to spit out whatever that output is. But you still need trial attorneys. You still need strategists. You still need some of these people though you just need a lot fewer of them. So how do the senior partners at the law firm look at their pipeline and get people tracked in? I mean, this kid, if he keeps going all the way through, he could be a $5,000 an hour attorney, but he's going to be the only one in his office because, you still need the attorneys, but you just need so many fewer of them.
Yeah. Well, I think about a lot of the work I did as an analyst in investment banking. 70% of it plus probably could now be done by a good AI stack that was piped into the right data sources and presentations and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's also a great point. For me, as much as I would have hated to admit it at the time, a lot of that rote work was really good for me to understand it, to kind of beat it into my brain, to kind of internalize how the profession worked, to get my quality standards up. Because I came in and it pains me to think of some of the work I was producing as a 22-year-old before I was, kind of quickly smacked on the head by the guy above me. But in a sense, yeah, it's a period of being able to digest things and mature in a low stakes way for careers that if you don't have that, I mean, I'm sure there's other alternatives, but we'll have to invent them.
We'll have to invent them. And, you know, on the positive side, okay, there's something to be said for the grind of, you know, low level, like sort of monkey work that a lot of people have to do. But our kids are actually unlikely to do so much of that. Like if they are proper centaurs and they're going forward and they're engaging in these tools, one ideal is that this is the end of crappy work. Like anything that's like regimented, repeated, like all of that stuff can be automated. And, you know, somewhere back here, I have the 6 types of working geniuses, which I love with, you know, coaching clients, and keeping people in their zone of genius is the goal. As an employer, you hire somebody because they've got something. They've got some marketing spark. They're really good at video editing or whatever. And then because often we're small business owners, you load them down with all this other crap. And it's all this reporting and whatnot. And it takes them away from what they're really good at. So tracking people into the things that they're really good at, and keeping them there such that they're a happy producer because that's their place of flow. You know, the trick with as a parent is helping your kid identify what is that thing that they're really good at, right? That isn't going to just be erased by all of this.
Yeah. And I think going back to like as a father or a parent, one thing I think is going to be exponentially more valuable it's always been incredibly valuable. I think it's going to become even more valuable is just interpersonal skills, because if AI and the robots are doing all of the rote work or even the analytical work, what does business boil down to? Business has always been about relationships. Life has always been about relationships, but even more so if a lot of that hard rote work is being replaced. And so, I don't know, I think about 10 years in the future, you also look at some of the kind of sad statistics and just interpersonal development skills with kind of youth today. And I'm sure every generation has said this, but I think there's statistical kind of proof to back this up more strongly. Matt, if you're a 22-year-old who can connect meaningfully and empathetically and be interesting and relationally vibrant with people that are 30, 40, 50, or even of your own peers, you are going to slay it. And you have average intelligence, you're going to crush it. And you know how to use AI, man. I mean, life is going to look good for you, assuming you got some work ethic. So that's one thing I think about with my kids too, is like trying to, and maybe it sounds a little overkill, but when I see great interactions with, for example, we're going to Hawaii in 3 months, and there was this beautiful place that we wanted to stay at. It was outside the budget we wanted to spend, and so I wrote a note to the woman or whoever was hosting it, and I think it was a woman. And I was like, "Hey," I introduced myself. "Hey, I'm Andrew from Montana. Love your place. Hey, we're thinking about coming to Hawaii. We'd love to stay at your spot, but it's a little more than we were planning on. Is there any chance you'd have flexibility on price? You know, we're a landlord as well. We have investment property. So, you know, we would take care of it. We understand the position you're in, appreciate the consideration." Anyway, I brought my daughter in, who's 11, and I kind of explained to her piece by piece, like, A1, you can ask for a discount. B, do it in a way where you humanize yourself, right? Like I'm telling her who I am, where I'm from. I'm telling her why she should trust me. We're going to take care of her property. You know, I'm not demanding it. Anyway, explaining all the little subtleties behind that message. I'm trying to do a lot of that so that when they get out of the house, or hopefully even well before, they have those soft skills. Anyway, that's kind of a bit of a sermon and a rant. Sorry, Kevin, you were subjected to it. But I think soft skills are going to be so important, even more than normal.
So I'm gonna tag off of something there that I think is really important that we need to recognize, that being human is not necessarily what is being trained into these models. And what I mean by that is that humanity for the models is being defined by web content. And particularly when I see things like Reddit, working a deal with Google, or anything to do with Grok on X, they are training models on representations of humanity that aren't necessarily the best. That online discourse is vile and terrible. And, you know, if you do want to get into these things are going to come for us, it's going to be because they're learning that humans are these vile creatures based on their interactions online. So understanding that people are different from their online personas and accommodating for that in the way that we're working with these models, I think is a wise thing. So good for you.
Yeah, that's a great addendum on that. Yeah. And you mentioned ChatGPT Teams. I'm less familiar with that. Is that just more or less a kind of like a company-wide account where different people in an organization can access different, chat interfaces, and then also you have different rules for the privacy, potentially, if you trust them, which is kind of, up for debate, if they're going to train or not. Like anytime we put kind of in our company, like in ECF, we do use AI, but I always talk to our team and always tell them like, hey, never put anything in there that you would not want. Like any PPI, it never goes in. Always use some kind of, numerical representation or something so that it's not linked back to people or to us. So do you think that's paranoid? Like maybe that's a good question. Like how I tend to be a little paranoid on that. Like I see what some of the other big tech has done over the years. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you're not going to use this. How much do you trust that stuff isn't going to make its way into the black soup at some point?
So a couple of points of view on this. One, we've been giving our data to the big boys forever. AWS is linked to Amazon. Who the heck trusts Amazon? Everybody, in terms of their data. If they wanted access to your data, if they wanted to use your data, they have the ability to use your data. Azure, Microsoft is more buttoned down, but they have all of the crown jewels of your enterprise out there. And the reason we put it there is because there are terms of service that say that they're not going to use it in X, Y, and Z way. Where it gets much more muddied is with LLMs themselves, because to answer your original question, what Teams does is it gives you a couple of different things. One, it gives you a term of service that says that they're not going to use your data for training. So they're saying, hey, we're not going to use this for training. Okay, well, we're trusting you to hold our data in all kinds of other ways, big tech. So buy a term of service. So superficially, you got to look at that and think, well, okay, right? But Teams also allows sharing of information and GPTs and usage. So with bigger clients, for example, I like to use Teams to see usage. So I see who in the organization is actually using the technology. Anyway, so two divergent questions, right? What is GPT? What are Teams and data security? On the hairy end of the technology, you are making a prompt which is going into the large language model. The large language model is making connections between all of the information that is out there, and it is spitting out a result. The issue that highly technical people have with data and data protection is that the model makers themselves don't actually understand. They truly don't understand what it means when that inbound data hits the model. It is hitting the public model. And whether the model, and I don't want to anthropomorphize it too much, decides that it's going to use that in some way, shape, or form is relatively unknown. So this is why you hear people like me constantly saying, don't put anything in there that you don't want, that you don't trust, even though there's terms of service. And I suspect that certain things there are going to be some really nasty things that work their way out, where people have done sort of dumb things about the information they put in there. So yeah, trust but verify. So I say don't put any PCI, any PII, any HIPAA, that sort of information in there that's really sensitive. However, on the flip side, you have people who are sort of gamifying this from a business intelligence perspective. They are deliberately putting fake information in there. So I don't know, Carl's Jr. just came to mind, but I don't think they're actually doing this. Like some sales team at Carl's Jr. is doing like they're going to create like this fake growth curve for middle America or whatever. And then they're going to feed it into the GPT. And then some competitor, Burger King or whatever, is going to hunt for Carl's Jr.'s Midwest best plans and they're going to get fake information out the other end. Like, this is actually happening. And I don't think it really matters because nobody's going to trust anything that comes out the other end. And if you want something totally simplistic, I've been telling people, like, as long as your data is sort of straightforward, like you're taking out the PII and, everything else is kind of coded, put a tag at the top of it that's like Acme Pie Company or something like that. So, the data is being associated with Acme Pie Company, not necessarily being associated with yourself. Bottom line, we don't really know what's being used by the models and what is being used by the models, or what isn't and what is. So, be cautious. Don't put highly sensitive information in there. But I personally am not overly stressed as long as you're taking reasonable care.
The crazy thing to me in what you just said is almost like we can trust the humans, but we can't trust the machine, is basically what it boiled down to. Is because, like, you're saying, okay, we can trust those companies, and not that you can't trust the machine. It goes deeper than that. It's that the people at the companies who built these LLMs don't entirely understand how they work, which I've heard this before from other people, but that's just kind of mind blowing, right? Like, you've built this machine that you don't know how it functions, and you get these outputs and you kind of build it, but the black box, it is a black box of sorts, which I had heard kind of various people say that, but no one that I trusted as much as you in terms of that, validating that, which is wild.
So when you look at regulation, one of the things that comes up is this idea of describability. And it's forcing the model companies to be able to explain the why. And they are worried about this because they truly don't know. If you put all of the world's data together into a room, you have these emergent behaviors, which is some of the really cool stuff that's starting to happen. It's just happening. And not going to anthropomorphize, not going to say we're at the singularity or like AGI or anything like that. But there are all of these unintended consequences of putting all the data together that people weren't anticipating. A sort of funny one is, it's semi-apocryphal, but for a while, GPT in particular was dumber on Fridays. And it was dumber on Fridays in terms of output and output quality. And what they figured out was, it's taking not just all of the web content and all the emails and everything else that's out there, but it's also taking the metadata from that content. And if you expand beyond the text of that information and into the metadata, Fridays, humans put out lower level material. They put out less. So it was ascribing the tendency of humans to put out less on Fridays. And for a hot minute, it was putting out less on Fridays. Now they fixed that through some balancing and some fine tuning in the weights of the model. But it's an emergent behavior. It just recognized this pattern that humans weren't expecting it to recognize.
Interesting. I was wondering, so many people listening, entrepreneurs, have really valuable data sets that they would love to be able to interact with a model, maybe even be able to have a chat interface where they can pipe in all the reviews or whatever data set it is probably the 80-20, 90-10 easiest way to do that for people, just to drop them into ChatGPT or to Claude in a project, or a custom GPT in ChatGPT, and interact with them there? Or is there a better way to like warehouse larger data pools and interact with them for custom purposes for small, merchants that are like in the size that are ECF?
It gets complicated in a hurry, right? So the 90-10 is probably interacting with smaller data sets. Again, you want to scrub them, don't put in your customers' emails and things like that. But interacting with them directly within the frontier models is probably the way to go right now. Now, it's very obvious that hundreds of millions of dollars is being invested in companies that are going to help you with this. And if there's another theme that I talk about a lot, it's the idea of how powerful distribution advantages are going to be going forward. And this is just general business type stuff, but looking for existing partners and how they're thinking about AI is going to be on the leading edge for finding the solution that's going to work for most enterprises. And I don't love it as an entrepreneur, but there's going to be there's some startup out there. There's like Pecan and Akio and some others that do data visualization, and they're not particularly cheap. right? But then you've got like the Tableaus of the world that have real funding, really understand how this stuff works and how their enterprise customers think and how they want to interact with their data. They're going to have a native opportunity to really develop these tools first, and everybody else is going to be sort of pinging off of them. And worse, if you're a lower tier company in one of those tech stacks that, you're doing your thing, you're pretty good at it, but you're not like an enterprise level solution, you probably aren't going to have the budget to invest in R&D to come up with the enterprise level solutions that the big boys can.
You mentioned Tableau. I have zero familiarity with them. Can you describe that in a little bit?
Tableau is just a business intelligence tool that does data visualization. To be honest, I just happened to have breezed across a Tableau development article the other day. I'm not currently using Tableau, but it's a tool that you can use to do rapid data visualization, and it's very, very common in enterprise.
Got it. You mentioned Perplexity as a tool you're excited about and use a lot. And I think some people listening are going to be familiar with it. I think a lot of people are still not familiar with Perplexity. Can you talk a little bit about it and why, like what it is? I think about it, and I haven't used it a lot, but I think about it as like if ChatGPT and Google kind of had a love child, Perplexity would pop out. I don't know if that's a good, if you would agree or not, but can you talk about, kind of describe it and let people know why you like it so much and why you're using it?
So, partially because I'm all in on this, but Perplexity has completely eliminated, not completely, but 90% eliminated Google searches for me because it is an answer engine versus a recommendation engine. And, big flag for e-commerce, digital marketing audiences is this has massive implications as far as SEO and how the future of web works and how the future of organic works. And oh my goodness, like we all need to be paying attention. So since we need to all be paying attention, all of you out there need to be using Perplexity or Google's search generated experience, whatever it is, to see how the LLM layer is basically completing the cycle, the circle for you, such that you're getting an answer. You're not after a whole bunch of recommendations about blogs about how to replace a lawnmower blade. You just want to know how to replace the lawnmower blade on your electric lawnmower, and it will lead you right to that answer. And it's basically they do a search just like Google would do a search, and then they are combining the information from the searches based on its own prompting logic. Now, GPT just launched in beta, so only to about 10,000 people at the moment, and I'm not one of them, a search function that's going to work a lot like Perplexity. So it's yet another example of just the arms race that's going on. So one of GPT's advantages is it has browse capability already built into it, so it can bounce off and go find spot information. Well, now it can do search completion as well, just like Perplexity can. So that's a problem for Perplexity for sure.
Interesting. It's been the last couple months have started to see, we don't have a lot, but I would say at least a couple, one or two at least per month, new members to the community. We always ask where people hear about us, and they're saying that they hear about us from ChatGPT, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Which is because, there's so much fear about ChatGPT just pretty much taking, all the information and regurgitating it out, and nobody gets any references or attribution. But yeah, it's been interesting seeing that. On the web front, what are your thoughts on Google? Like, I think you can make two cases, and I think they both have merits. One is that Google has more hard data and personal information and raw data, which is the fuel for AI of any of the big tech companies. And so therefore they're best positioned to be able to win that game. The other is that you have companies like Perplexity coming up. If I think about which tech company is most likely to be disrupted, it would be Google in terms of user interface, in terms of how I feel like the quality of the product has gone down. They just, they're anyone who's listening knows how hard it is and how much less valuable a number one ranking or even a number 3 ranking has gotten over the years. Anyway, do you have thoughts on like how Google is going to do going forward and how search is going to be different? Because it seems like they could either reinvent the game and double down on their position, which is extremely strong, or get knocked off.
So don't ever discount Google. Like they have a budget the size of GDPs, right? Like, and they have all of the data out there, and they invented this technology. GPT is not a brand. GPT is a technology that was invented by Google back in 2017. And all of these founders of most of these large language models in some way, shape, or form were involved in that Google research technology. But Google got all wrapped up in the innovator's dilemma, where they recognize that their cash cow is whatever it is, $200 billion in search, and disrupting search by limiting search to these answers is a really bad. That's a problem for them. And now they're not like a little cute startup anymore. So when they stumble, it gets all of this publicity. You know, there was the DEI incident a few months ago. There were the eating rocks on pizzas type things, like, or glue on pizza. That was just a few weeks ago. Like they just go ahead.
What was? Sorry to interrupt. What was that one? I haven't heard.
Okay, sorry. So Google's AI augmented results were yielding some really bad things that it was picking up from like the Onion, like eating a rock. Like they literally indexed the Onion, which somebody made. They didn't like. So it sounds like an authoritative news source. If you're a model in trading, you're like, oh, eat a rock a day. That's a good idea. Okay. Or it picked up Reddit threads about how do you get cheese to stick to your pizza? Well, you should use non-toxic glue. So there's this stuff happens all the time in the other frontier models, but they don't get the hate because they're not Google. So I'm a little sympathetic to them. It's going to be an interesting time. I've been telling people to keep an eye open for beta ad tools on the Google side, because Google also needs to monetize this in some way, shape, or form. User behavior is so oriented around Google. I am definitely an outlier that I'm not using Google. I'm using Perplexity, and I don't really expect Perplexity to supplant Google that way. People will continue to Google things. That experience will get better. There will be more citations. But again, like I was talking about distribution earlier, the bigger winners will be the bigger winners. So those who already have share, if you're basically limiting search results to a combination of the top 3 sources and they're all kind of meshed together, everybody else pretty much loses. So there's going to be an arms race of trying to figure out how you get into those results. And most people are going to lose because you're going up against massive companies that, if you're Google and you're the model, you're going to rely on things like domain authority. There's a lot of debate out there about how they're going to do this, but they really do want the highest quality results, not just who's paying them the most money. And at that point, you're basically eliminating all the chaff under the hood. So those a search that might have been 80% to the top 5 and 20% to the next 20 is going to be 98% to the top 5, and everybody else is going to get like peanuts going down the chain.
Yeah. How do you see eComm brands using AI for actual? You mentioned, of course, the frontier models and kind of data analysis there, but for eComm specifically, where are you seeing application uses that are effective, that are quality, and actually saving time and money?
Customer service, for sure. I mean, they're a little bit rocky as far as how the implementations are working, but it goes beyond just answering tier 1 tickets automatically. I would suspect that very few brands are going to be doing human response to tier 1, like, where's my stuff? What's my tracking number? Does it come in blue? Like the sort of little stuff that's often offshored right now is going to just happen automatically and probably going to make customers really happy. However, the piece that I think that people need to invest in more is the business intelligence that comes from those exchanges. One of the things that I'm seeing in larger brands, so 9-figure type brands, is they're not just doing like a Zendesk implementation of AI, but they're also doing data extraction from it. Because when you think about it, if you're doing 1,000 tickets a day because you're a big brand, all of the information that's in there right now, based on SOPs of most brands, is there's some some customer experience like head, and they're gathering up all this information from tags and things like that. And then they go to a meeting and they brief supply chain about like, a sharp edge on whatever widget. And it's just very slow and very high friction. Whereas if you can take this amorphous whole of all of the communications you have, phone communications, email communications, whatever they are, and mine it on all of these fronts, you now get marketing opportunities, you get supply chain risks or opportunities, you get new product development opportunities that are all proactively presented to the business leadership. And that proactive part is what's really cool and really new and heading our way. So that's not just eComm. That's brands that are forward looking and have a high level of customer exchange anyway. They're really able to extract those insights rapidly. Content, of course, caveat being, if you're producing garbage, you're not going to get rewarded for that. Personalization will be it'll just be table stakes, like the idea of highly personalized emails. We've been able to do this as far as segmentation and tagging for a while, but making basically everything in your flows to be highly personalized based on user behavior. There are a bunch of people who are working on this, but you can also do it yourself if you're reasonably tech savvy. It's funny. I think that eComm, most of my advisory is actually ending up out of eComm, because what I'm finding is that eComm companies they're generally much more lean than traditional companies as far as the sort of overhead stack that they have. That's the way that they were built. As a result, they've always had to do more with less. As a result, when they saw the opportunities being presented with AI, they dove in a lot faster than a lot of other verticals did.
Interesting. Do you have a favorite on the customer service front?
No, not really. It's another place where it's so close. It's like I want a Gorgeous or a Reamaze to like really pop out and have it work seamlessly. Currently, I'm working on a big Zendesk project that has promise, but they're out there running around acquiring other companies. So they're doing like M&A, like integration on top of trying to get all these products out to customers, and it's been really, really slow. So one of the features of where we are is you can do a lot of this yourself. So I find myself and my own dev team basically getting annoyed and duct taping solutions together such that we can get the information from the raw data. It's not like instant because we're not building like real-time data feeds or anything like that. But if you're trying to do customer service mining, as you asked earlier, the 80-20 is dump it in and ask questions of it. It's a little bit more complicated than that as far as doing a proper prompt structure and whatnot. But if you're a more mid-sized e-commerce company and you have an assailable number of tickets, it's not really rocket science to ask the sort of questions that I was just putting out there as far as supply chain, marketing, customer opportunities of that data.
Well, especially if you have, like you said, 750 million words in the context that you can drop in a data file. Do you know what the current context windows are for Claude and for ChatGPT-4?
So it changes by the user and by the day. Claude is saying that it's at a 256K, which I may be, no hate please, but I had just looked that up recently. So it's definitely creeping up. But then you have differences between the consumer platform and the API basis. API may not track the same way. I think, you need to, it changes all the time, and it can change as far as your actual instance, and it can be hard to figure out when you're like running out. And when you run out of context, bad things happen. The not like horrendous, but like here you have this massive thing you've been working on, and Claude or GPT will be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm good. No more. So, and it's better than it getting dumb, but it's inefficient. There's a lot of inefficiency in the way that this stuff works because it's rerunning these massive prompts. So the deeper you get into the conversation, the more massive the prompt that has to be fed back in. And that's really inefficient. And that's where technologies like RAG, embeddings, and vector databases come into play, because you're making those conversational pieces much more streamlined, so you can get more into the context than it even feels like. So a million token context could be several million words if an embeddings process is followed.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still so much better than even it was 6 months ago or even 3 months ago, because I feel like the biggest constraint for me historically has been running out of context and having 100,000 tokens. Like, the stuff you can do is, let alone a million. I don't know. I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about for the future, is just those massive context windows feeding stuff in, and it opens up the door so wide for really cool opportunities. I'd love to hear your thoughts on training models and custom models and applications. And a little context for this, I've heard of, not a lot, I quasi regularly hear people talk about how we built this model and we trained it with our own language, our own data set. And to step back even further, we took a run. I think I've talked about this before. I need to do an episode on this, but we took a run at building our own kind of AI tool for eCommerce Fuel. I went to lengths to make sure we were pulling out all the PII, but the idea was like, hey, if you could roll under the forms where you have 10 years of people who have shared information and say, or even the last two years, and say, hey, what has changed in Facebook marketing in the last 2 years, and how can I, what should I be thinking about? And it pulls all the relevant data, not from just like people, but from bots or articles on Forbes, which are worthless, but from people in the trenches, and synthesizes that for you. That our data set that we have is so valuable. It would be such an incredibly efficient, faster way to know, how to improve your Facebook marketing. And we spent tens of thousands of dollars building this model, pulling it all in, vectorizing it. It's probably beyond the scope of this conversation. And even after 6 months, 25 to 30K, we decided not to launch it for a couple of reasons. But one of the big ones was the results were not very impressive. And we spent a meaningful amount of time doing that. I think you helped out with that. Really appreciate your help on that. Anyway, my point being, when I hear people say, we trained up a model with our own data, kind of casually, like we did this on a Saturday, I think, did you really? Because to me, having gone through it, it's very expensive, hard to get results. Is it true that when people say that, they are either not understanding what it means to train a model? Because to really train a model, you have to have something like you talked about, the frontier models. Those are all trained with lots of data. Or are they saying maybe, hey, we went into ChatGPT and put some context in there that ChatGPT thinks about when it returns results? Or am I just an idiot and completely missed the boat, and somehow there's a much easier way to train a model with information?
Oh, so one, you were just early. You were just early. Like, I think back, that was over a year ago when that was going down, and you were up against a bunch of different things. The main point being context lengths. So context is the amount of information that the prompt can take in and for consideration at any one time. And that continues to grow with Gemini being over 1 million tokens. So a token is 75% of a word as just a rough estimate. So, you can get like 750,000 words into a document, and it's contextualized. Again, we're not going to get into like embeddings and RAG and things like that, but it can be really, really effective to have this massive load of information that you can query, and it can retrieve really, really good results. But when you were doing it, the context links were like
8K.
8K. Yeah, they were really, really short, which really hampered your ability to put out effective outputs. And it meant that the embeddings, so you have a vector database that is created through embeddings, they had to be tighter, and making them tight that way is a tech lift. And, even now that's a struggle, but you're able to get looser and looser on the amount of information that's contained in an individual embedding, which results in better outputs. Better, not perfect. I actually consider it a bit of a flag when somebody says, I do with clients, I'll do like a vendor assessment type training where, okay, your vendor's trying to sell you these things, this like dream of automagic AI outputs. If they say they are training their own model, it is a flag.
Okay.
They are fine tuning a model to some degree or another, but that is still a lift. It is still, in a lot of cases, it's a human lift. And I know that you were doing human-based fine-tuning behind the scenes. And it's one of those things where we will get there, but I'm not going to say we're totally not there, because really cutting edge type enterprises that are going all in on this and they're doing tens of thousands of fine tuning points are getting much better results. But it's just a little early to have the expectation that it's going to work the way you wanted it to work.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to hear, and some validation. What are you working on, Kevin? What's coming up next for you? What kind of stuff are you tinkering with under the hood at the moment?
So it's funny, I'm now a couple of years into this particular journey, and I'd been working in machine learning before that, but it's not happening as fast as I want it to, because I see all of the potential, and I walk into some rooms and people are on it, like they're totally on it. And I walk into others. I did a keynote at a big insurance conference last week, and that whole room was like, AI, what? And it's like, oh my gosh, you guys run like mid-market, like 9-figure type businesses, and you're not paying any attention to this, except for maybe you tried to use GPT 3.5 to plan a vacation and it sucked, so you moved away. So what I do a lot of advisory with boards and C-suites and M&A when they're trying to understand this stuff. And what I found is there's not enough literacy. And anybody who's in this space is going to tell you this, that there's just not enough literacy about how this stuff works, not just at the leadership ranks, but throughout the ranks of organizations. And it's one thing to have like a visionary leader in the organization who's like, we're going to be AI forward and we're going to do this. And then their staff is like, AI, what? They might be using tools to sort of like cheat and do their job. Cheat's a bad word. That's not what I mean, but they're probably deploying AI to like try and make their own life better, but there's no policy, there's no practice, there's no AI council, there's no framework around it, such that when the CEO is like, yeah, we're going to do this new thing with Zendesk and we're going to get all of these new outputs that are going to work in supply chain and marketing, and everybody else is like, oh, I don't know what that means, right? So pushing literacy into the organization. It's a bit long-winded, but since I've spent so much time doing this like introductory, like eye-opening work, I'm working on a series of courses out there that are helping leaders acclimatize to different concepts in AI, how they can be deployed in terms of broad strokes, which has been really fun. And it's also liberating for me, because if I can equip an organization with the basic information asynchronously, then when I come into the organization, we can get right to brass tacks. We can really start working on solving problems, as opposed to me explaining neural networks and such.
Man, I don't envy you having to potentially update those courses every 3 months to maybe every week or two. Oh, I mean, the shelf life has got to be rough on those.
It's getting better, but yes, it's hideous. It's totally hideous that like, oh, look, GPT-4 now. Oh, drat.
You have a course on poetry that would age exceptionally well, update it every 5 to 10 years, maybe. And then you have the courses on AI.
Yeah.
Well, if people are interested in those courses, where can they find out more about them, purchase them? You can kind of learn more.
Madbrains.ai is my site. It has a bunch of other information in there about the types of things that we do as well. I'm also always on LinkedIn. I like to post weekly little practical snippets, 2 to 5 minute bits on things that you really need to know. It's not necessarily the newest like bells and whistle type product, but sort of evolving our thinking around LLMs. So I'd encourage you to follow me there as well.
Yeah, on LinkedIn. And then you also do some CEO coaching. on the side as well. Is that something you're still taking clients for?
Oh yes, yeah. I absolutely love that. Having been all the way through the cycle of founding numerous D2C and other companies and exiting and doing the whole thing, I take a great deal of pleasure in that coaching work. It's really been a fun thing to work on and to help my clients grow and assumedly get to an exit. So I'm always looking for clients who are on a growth trajectory where things have gotten pretty complicated and they need sort of an advisor who can help cut through things. With the added bonus is I can't help myself. So I'm always sprinkling AI and automation on top of the coaching. So I may be sort of unique in that respect that I'm the CEO AI coach guy.
Love it. It sounds like a domain you should go buy right now.
CEO AI coach guy .ai.
Yeah, a little long, but sounds very catchy. And if people want to reach out to you about the coaching, same thing. Should they ping you on LinkedIn? Should they?
Ping me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find.
Okay.
LinkedIn, Mad Brains, wherever it might be.
Awesome. Kevin, always so fun to sit down and geek out about this kind of stuff. Thank you for everything you've done at ECF, from meetups to speaking at our events to just being an amazing forum member and also coming on and dropping all the AI knowledge and thoughts. So really appreciate it. Always love catching up and looking forward to the next time we get a bike down in Park City or up here in Montana. So that's
I'll probably go riding later.
Oh man, it's always hard, always fun trying to keep up with you. So we'll have to do that too.